Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're back. It's season 4 of Cataloging Cocktails, the honest, no BS, non-salesy conversation about data management, presented by Data.World, the data catalog for leveraging agile data governance to give power to people and data. I'm coming to you live from Austin, Texas. My co-host Juan is coming from somewhere else. I'll tell you in just a second. I'm longtime data nerd and product guy at Data.World, Tim Gasper, joined by Juan.
Hey, Tim. I'm Juan Takeda, Principal Scientist at Data.World. And yes, we are back and we're back live and we're starting to go out to places. I am in sunny Orlando right now. We are wrapping up the Gartner Data Analytics Summit. And we're just so excited to get back on the road, to start to get on the road, and taking cataloging cocktails to the road. And we said, if we're meeting people at conferences, we need to have live guests. And I'm really excited to have my good friend, buddy, Vip Parmar, who's a head of global data at WPP. Vip, how are you doing?
I'm doing really great. I'm really happy and hyped to be here today.
Oh, this is so exciting because so much we're going to go talk about, which I think is one of the themes that came out of Gartner today. But first, let's tell and toast. What are we drinking and what are we toasting for? Vip, you go first.
So what am I toasting for? So one of the things that I'm really big on over the last year or so is being, and I presented this in a slide that I did the other day in the presentation, which is the fact that we're data rich and knowledge poor. So I'm toasting to becoming knowledge rich, right? I want all of us to become the Elon Musks of knowledge.
Ooh, that's a good one. And what are you drinking today?
And I'm drinking a mojito. The mojito without the good stuff. But it's good enough for me.
Tim, how about you?
I love it. I'm going to toast to people. I'm feeling very grateful for the people in my life, both personally, my family, my friends, as well as the awesome people I get to collaborate and work with professionally. So people are who I'm toasting to today. And I am drinking a Balcones Big Baby Bottled in Bond a whiskey, which is actually cured in a tequila cask. And so it's a very interesting tasting whiskey.
Oh, well, I'm going to combine those, people and knowledge, right? For me, I've been talking a lot about this knowledge first world. And I have to say that these conversations I've been having over the last couple of months during the break, you can see I've gotten much more active on LinkedIn and talking about data modeling, talking about what knowledge and about people first, context first, relationship first. And I am just so ecstatic about kind of the conversations that we're having with folks, that they all get it. And so cheers to that. We need to become knowledge rich around that. And that starts with being people. And I'm having a twist on old fashioned. I think I've done this before. It's one of my favorites. A bartender told me it's called a tattletale. So it's an old fashioned, but used with scotch, blended scotch. I use just Johnny Walker and with topped off with a little bit of Lafroy. So it's very smoky. So cheers to people and knowledge.
Cheers, people and knowledge.
So we got our warm-up question today. Today we're talking about bringing together business and IT. So what other two things typically wouldn't go together, but they do really well?
So for me, it's a childhood favorite, which I haven't had in years, but it's having a nice cold glass of Coca-Cola with a scoop of ice cream in there and a straw. Sounds wrong, but it works.
I think that sounds right. But it isn't. How about you, Tim?
I'm gonna say, I'm half Korean, and so I love my Korean food. So for me, it's Gochujang with anything else.
Expand on the Korean part, because forgive my ignorance on that.
So gochujang is like a spicy fermented paste that that is like you can get it less spicy or very spicy, and you can put it on pizza, you can put it on rice, you can put it on a sandwich, you can put it on whatever you want. You can put it on fruit, whatever pleases you.
Well, I'm going to follow that one because my wife is Mexican, and I've learned now how to put a lot of spice on a lot of things and stuff that I was like, what, you're going to put that spicy thing called tajin on this fruit, and she puts it on everything. And actually, I'm getting fond of it. Did not expect it. Other things I thought about was potato chips on a bunch of stuff. We put in Colombia, you put potato chips on hot dogs, potato chips crumbled on burgers. And one thing I'll never forget, the first time I tried it, it blew my mind. Haggis on a burger. All right. Enough about some weird things here. But let's get into our honest, no BS discussion. All right, Vip. Bridging the gap, bringing business and IT. Like, this is the obvious thing, right? This is the age-old problem. We discuss this every time. Like, why is this obvious thing not happening? I mean, why do we continue having these gaps?
So it's always a strange but weird one, right? Because, you know, for in my experience over the years, it's just like business and technology, they always just blame each other, right? It's just like, you know, the business have demands on technology, technology expects stuff from the business, it goes wrong, they start pointing the fingers at each other, and then it never resolves itself, right? But I think there needs to be, first and foremost, it's like any problem that you have in this world, first, you need to accept that this problem exists, right? Because folks say, no, it's not us, it's them, right? People need to understand that everyone plays a part in resolving this. So this is something where the business and IT really, really need to come together, right? In solving all of this. And I think a lot of it is about understanding, right? Now, when I say understanding, it's around and I use my boys, my sons, as an inspiration for this, right? It's just like whenever someone comes to you in the business context and says, I want you to do this, I need you to deliver X, I need you to do Y, it's ask the question, how and why? Why do you want to do that? Why? Okay, how is that going to make an improvement for you? And keep on asking those questions until you get to the root of what they're trying to achieve, right? Where are they trying to get to? What problem are they trying to solve? And then what I always find is that their ask, right, is the wrong ask. Okay, now I understand what you want. And I also understand what you've asked me to do, but those two things don't align, right? What you need is something else. But what you also need to do as part of that journey is not to be too arrogant, right? And say, I know it, right? Because part of that journey is understanding more about the business, right? And I'm thinking with my technology hat on, right? It's okay. What are you doing? How does your department or what you're doing, how does that operate? And try to really get under the skin of why those problems have existed or why they manifest or why those opportunities have really, really come about. And it's to have a grown-up conversation, right? And understand and learn from one another, right? And qualify those asks and those needs. So it really boils down to asking loads and loads of questions and really getting down to the root of what it is that you're trying to solve, and then getting to the right approach around doing that.
All right, a lot to unpack here, and this is so spot on because we talk about it all the time. And I remember we had our guest a while back who said, remember when we asked him what are the qualities that the kind of data folks need to have, are just kind of techniques. And he said two things: empathy and curiosity. I think this goes into that, right? Like that asking how, asking why, is that curiosity. I mean, that's what kids do all the time. Now, how do we? I mean, I think first of all, anybody in an organization should have that kind of motivation to ask how and why. But how do we get some structure into this? How do you get your teams to start asking how and why? What is that process to kind of that cultural change, or how do you do that?
So it's to, the answer is around, don't do anything that you're asked to do unless you know exactly how it's going to impact the bottom line or how it's going to drive business value. Otherwise, you're not doing it, right? Do not, you cannot prioritize anything unless you can attribute it to a business value, right? Okay, sometimes we're going to get things that we have to prioritize because they come, right from the top, and that stuff's got to get done. But, it should be us to collectively, the business and technology, prioritizing that value together, right? And it should be, if we can't explain what that business value is, and you've got to be able to measure it, right? If it's, I'm going to improve sales, okay, what are you going to improve sales by? How long is that going to take, right? It's always got to be measurable. So it's really got to boil down to those basic elements, right?
That makes sense. How do you how do you make sure that a team is empowered to be able to ask those questions, right? And what do you think about, like, where there may be cultures within a company where sort of the data folks who want to ask those questions don't feel like they're in a good position to do so? How do we create a better scenario and a situation for them to do that?
That's a tricky one, right? Because you're right. Culturally, people don't always feel as though that they can challenge, right? And people take it the wrong way. It's just like, you're the person who delivers for me, right? Just do what I ask you to do. But
Right.
you've got to do it in a way in which is, and it goes back to the point of being empathetic, right? I'm not asking to be awkward, right? I'm not asking to be, difficult. I'm not asking all these questions so you'll just go away and then go and do something else and leave me alone. I'm doing this so I want to help you. I want to understand, I want to advise you and give you something that you really, really need. And I think you've got to pitch it in that way, as well. And come across in that way, because I've seen it done in the past before, and it's done in a bit of an arrogant way, right? So I think it's really about, and then also as a leader or a manager, right, you've got to be able to ask your team what they're doing and why, and then in the same way as you challenge them, I think it invokes that spirit into them as well. And I think it takes time to do that, and it takes some guts as well. But as long as people know that you're coming with good intentions, right, and you want to help them in the right way, I think then that follows suit thereafter.
The good intentions is something that I think it's important, because when people start asking why, kind of the receiver may take that with like, oh, why? You don't trust me, you don't believe me, or stuff like that.
Or are you trying to get out of the work? You don't want to do it, or something?
Yes, yeah. So I think it's. This is the cultural mindset that we need to do. That this needs to be coming from an executive point of view, right? And also, if you're asking for something, I think you should also be in the position to explain why that is important. So if you're in the business side and I need this stuff, like, you need to be able to explain why that is important, why that is valuable, how much value that's going to provide. Like, could you actually quantify this? Like, how would our business and organization be worse off because we're not answering that? And actually, if you can't answer that question, then you should question yourself if that's actually the right one.
Agree. And you've touched upon a key point there, right? In terms of, coming down from the executives, right? And this attitude, this behavior, this mindset, this philosophy has to start from the top, right? Our CIOs, our CDOs, our COOs, and, all of the people at the top tier of our business need to be able to relate to all of their peers within their business, right? And set out their strategy, not in a way of, okay, I'm a CIO, so I'm going to do all this technology stuff. I'm CDO, so I'm going to do all this data stuff. It's really around, okay, at that top level, understanding what the strategic goals and objectives are for the firm, and then relaying it down through their chains, right? And then driving that culture of collaboration, right? It's not just a handing off the baton of requirements, right? It's around co-creating those requirements. It's, co-identifying those opportunities. It's co-identifying those problems. So they really need to make sure that as leaders across the business, that they're working hand in glove at that top level. And then it makes it easier, because if you've got that culture all the way from the top down, then at the middle and the bottom levels, it becomes a lot more easy, because they're doing it because that's what you're asked to do. That's what they're doing. So that's what that's what I'm conforming to. If you have that culture of compartmentalism, right, where, I'm just marketing, so that's all I do. I'm just data, that's all I do. I'm just whatever. Then that's just gonna mean that, everyone down that chain is gonna just stay in their own box. And this is about making sure that those boxes open up and people start to overlap in the right way. So it's, as always, it's got to come down from the top, and that's got to come down from leadership.
So what are the things that I'm kind of let's brainstorm here live. People have kind of their operational goals. You follow OKRs and stuff like that. And you think about it even from an engineering perspective, right? We define what is our product, what is our roadmap, and what are our goals going to be in this quarter and next quarter. We've been talking now about data products for a long time. Right. And one of the things that we talk about the data products is that we should have a roadmap. Like, we should be aligning. I always talk about, let's go catalog the questions people have. let's go understand what are the priorities and then put them within kind of the roadmap of what these data products are doing that need to be aligned with whatever OKRs or whatever types of goals that you're setting within that quarter. And if you can't make that connection, then you're not being part of the team who's driving those goals that as a company we're establishing. And I think that's something that we need to go do, because I think we're just being very ad hoc too.
Agree. And you need to do that continually, right? Recently, we did an exercise in my team where, I got everyone in the team to note down, what is it you're working on, right? And how does it tie to business value? And the business value is our, strategic objectives. And we found a whole bunch of things that they don't align. And it wasn't that, we started doing things that didn't have any value. Once upon a time, they had value, right? But like most modern businesses, right, your focus, and your vision and your objectives, that's going to change, right? You've got to be really, really agile. So it's important that you do this on a continual basis. You don't just start the year and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. It's every quarter you should be looking at these things. Am I doing the right things, right? What has changed? Where has been that shift in the focus? And is the shift in our attention in terms of what we're doing and what we're delivering, is that mirroring that change as well? Because most of the time it isn't. You just kind of get stuck, and don't be afraid of, well, do you know what? I started something that's not worth finishing, right? It's a good initiative, but it's not tying, it's not laddering up to, those new objectives. So, you should never be afraid of stopping something, parking something, and moving on, to the next thing.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense, Vip. And I feel like this is the culture around data and just general curiosity and empathy that we need to get to across our entire business, all of our businesses. And I like the comment here on YouTube by Etienne saying, is it fair to also expect curiosity from the other person? This way, the conversation may be less unilateral, as both parties would share their end of the problem. What do you think about that comment, and who takes responsibility for establishing that culture? Is you're global head of data management, right? What is the role of leadership in all of this? What is the role of people on the ground, right? You've mentioned, for example, data translators. What's their role in all of this?
So I think, it's interesting because data translators are an emerging role, and they're kind of the unicorns that are going to kind of help kind of bridge some of the gap. As well. But I think it's important to really go back to fostering that culture of curiosity, right, across all levels of the business. And there's a piece around, and I know Juan's spoken about this before, but it's about having literacy. But I think it's about having literacy on both sides of the fence, right? Technologists need to become more literate around the business, and vice versa, right? The business folks need to be more conversant and more literate around technology, right? So, it's like, for example, some of the things that we're doing at WPP is by bridging that gap is we're saying, okay, we want our business folks to understand what AI is. And the simple output that we want, the simple measure is that we want to train them on what AI is, so they can answer that they can answer an elevated question on what is it, right? So, and then and in the same way, we want our technology folks, like, for example, the folks in my team are to really get in, when you're getting into projects, right, start to understand what it is, right? Work with folks to, and to be really, really curious, but let folks challenge you. Don't be afraid of that challenge, right? As well. So it's around it's a two-way street of, being, literate on both sides of the fence.
I'm really happy you're bringing that up. I've been pushing this more about the business literacy, and I think I'm glad you're validating that that's something that we need to go do. You said something that I'm trying to connect two dots here is when we're having this process of asking why and how and why and how, like that is really, really important to be able to document what's going on there, because in that process, you're learning the business.
Yeah.
And I think this is what I talk a lot about, like this therapist role. That isn't just about, ask a bunch of questions and then we come and have an aha moment. Is we want to keep track of those means and be able to go connect the dots across all the different people we're doing. Because one thing is how the business works or how it's supposed to work, but the other thing is how it's actually working. and talking to the people so you figure out, okay, this is what it's supposed to look like, but we're really not there. And these are the gaps that we have. So that's I think these are the roles. We need these types of roles, I think, and have that incentives of people to go ask why more. Anyways, I'm starting to rant here.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, but I think, there's having the roles is great, right? Having, roles like translators and all that, super good, right? But you can't say, okay, I'm going to put some data translators in place, and then everyone in the business is, great, we got this. That's their job. That's not mine. Right, you need to embed it into people's roles. You need to build that culture. So whilst it's great having these folks doing it, you've got to make sure you've got to, and it cascades from the top down. They've got to really, really push and challenge our people in doing these things, right? And they've got to be the ones asking their people how and why. Why are these things happening? Why are you doing them? What priority are you giving them? Where's the the value proposition to the bottom line? Where's that linkage, right? Because if they can't answer it, you're in trouble.
Just real quick, is this idea like which roles should be more, or what hats should be more embedded, right? Is it like data translator, data steward, data therapist, like you mentioned, Juan? Are these all sort of things that should be more embedded in with other people to change the way they do their role as a data engineer, as a whatever their role might be? Or is that the other side of this is, no, there actually needs to be a formal role of a data steward, of a data translator, of a data product manager, right?
So interesting. I think it depends on the organization, what you're doing, your construct, right? Things like data stewards, right? I've always been a firm believer of those. This should be something that's embedded into people's roles, right? There are people that are data stewards that don't have the title of data steward, right? And in fact, to this day, I've never met a person that has that title, right? Whereas those, data translators, for example, I think they should probably be independent. That's not, people do it as part of their roles, but you need to have these independent roles that really think about all of these things too, as well. But I think we need to be careful about giving people these roles and these titles. You're a data owner, you're a data steward, right? Because, in a previous life, we've done that, right? We said, okay, you're the steward. And okay, no, you're giving me more work to do. No, we're not giving you more work to do. And then they run for the hills, right? Because then they're just like, I don't know how to do this stuff. You've got to make sure that when you're giving people these additional, they're not roles, they're responsibilities, right? They're very clear on what they are, but they have the means and the mechanisms to be able to fulfill that role, right? And to do those things, right? So it's just like, okay, you are the, Juan, you're the data steward of customer data. Okay, great. All right. So, but how, but making sure that you've got the tools. Okay. So, things like, obviously data catalogs, things about making sure that they have, the analytics tools, that they have everything they need to be able to manage that data. So I think it's the responsibility of technology around not only making sure that we divide those roles up and we make those clear, but we give people the capabilities and the platforms to be able to manage their data and fulfill their roles, right? And then, but have that two-way conversation to say, look, we're going to give you these capabilities, but what do you need to be able to manage it, right? Because you want to reduce that overhead, right? Because at the end of the day, these people are, their bread and butter is going to be doing operational things that are going to drive business value. So this has got to be made easy, right? And, and it's, I can't remember who said it, but I was at a conference a while ago, and someone spoke about governance and the point, and pinning out roles, and it was like, and their conclusion was, if data governance gets in the way of what you're doing, right, or it makes it slower or more cumbersome, you're doing it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So don't do it wrong. Do it and make it easier for people. Make it clear, but make it easy, right? That's what we should be doing. And it's not down to technology to say this is how you should do it. It should be that joined up collaborative conversation around how do we do it, how do you make it easy, and how do you make it something that just happens in the background, right? We talk about
you can give people more responsibility, but you have to give them the tools, give them the empowerment, or else it just becomes more. It's just burden, right?
Exactly. The right kind of empowerment. We talk about privacy by design. We'll just talk about governance by design, right? And think about principles like that in that kind of way.
I want to get more. Let's get concrete and have some takeaways here on. It seems like a lot of what we're talking about is our roles and team structures and stuff. What would be the ideal way, an ideal team structure that you think that would be able to bridge this gap?
So I think, and I formulated one before, which was actually shot down, but it's actually one that's I've seen work, right, which is to have a bit of a decentralized structure, right? So people call it centers of excellence or whatnot, but you need teams, right? So it could be an analytics team, for example, right? And they're delivering analytics for an organization, for marketing, for finance, and all of the relevant sub-departments. So we should be having analysts and scientists as appropriate that are actually working in those teams. They should be sitting in those departments, working with those people. They should be having a dotted line into the right people in those departments. And they should be working hand in glove to understand what's going on a day-to-day basis. Having that translator hat on, right, where they're understanding the challenges and the opportunities, and then working with people hand in glove to then work through them. Right, I called them, super users. Back in the day, they should be those, those analytics, those super users, right? But they're in that part of the business. But they are connected to the central hub of the analytics team or the data teams or whatever they may be, right? So then they have, they have knowledge of the shared platforms, the working practices, and all of that good stuff that they should be using. But I've seen that work really, really well in some organizations.
So this has been one of the biggest trends, I think, now lately, especially with the data mesh and being able to go do the domains and decentralize and push the work down to where the domains are, and then push the data team inside of those domains. And those data folks, the data scientists, data engineers. Is that it? Is that really the only thing that's been missing, or a big component, or is there something else? Like if we had a magic wand right now, and we said, okay, we were able to go get our data, our domains, people in there. Do we think life is going to be great, or no. What else?
No. There's more to it, right? And there's the literacy piece as well. Something that always resonates with me, and it's like in my career, or some point, I was having a conversation with an engineering team, right? And they weren't doing something that was really, really important for me, and it's not so much important for me, but important for the business. And I remember having this conversation with this guy, and I said to him, I was just like, I'm asking you to bring over, 500,000 rows of data, right? Do you know what that means? No. Okay. That's 500,000 customers. Yeah. Think customers, not rows. Right. And then with that 500,000 customers, right, with that data, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I want to enable. This is the problem that I want to solve. Right. So, but everyone just thinks data. Everyone thinks tables. Everyone thinks rows. Everyone thinks columns. Right. But behind that is something. There's an entity. Right. It could be customers, products, behavioral data. But have more of an appreciation. You don't need to understand all of it, but have more of an appreciation of why that data exists and what it means.
I would argue that the ones who have more, not just appreciation, but have more and more understanding of it, are the ones who are going to be the successful leaders of tomorrow.
I agree.
So, and this was something I was saying recently. I was being very bold and blunt about it. It's like, if you want to succeed in your career, you want to go forward, like, understand the business. Otherwise, if you don't want to spend the time understanding the business, then yeah, guess what? Probably not going to be a leader, and that's fine. It's okay. Just don't have understand it. Let's understand the baselines and where are the expectations around this.
And I think, and not only does it have a whole bunch of inherent benefits in terms of what we're trying to do here, and what we're talking about here today, going along that journey, you're then going to find other areas or other pockets of the business that are actually working against each other. Right. It is like, okay, I get what the business is about. I get what you're doing, but what you're doing and the way you're doing it is different to the way in which they're doing it. And and I'm here as the technologist, and I'm trying to work and deliver for both of you. This is just a recipe for a disaster that's looming, right? It's going to, help you to have, identify, where those potential car crashes are going to happen as well, right? And I think that's, a strong trait in leadership, right? Having that broad level of understanding across, the entire, understand everything across that business, and then understand exactly how it's operating, how people are working, how departments are working, how they're integrating with each other. That is super, super valuable. Then you start to realize and understand, well, you know what? Here are the things that everyone's asking of us, but here are the things that we need to formulate and that we should be doing that no one's asking us to do.
Yeah. You mentioned literacy, and you mentioned about thinking about customers, not rows. And a lot of the theme of what we were talking about is like, how do we get on the same page? How do we communicate? And if we're not on the same page, how do we have a culture that allows us to recognize what pages we're on and start to communicate that to each other and get on that same page with each other? I want to come back a little bit about this topic of literacy. I think that's really hard, and I think we've tapped into it a little bit with things like, oh, we got to be more data driven. Let's empower people to learn about data skills and things like that, right? But ultimately, both on the data driven side as well as on like the business literacy side, right? I feel like we're very dependent on like HR onboarding. Like, did we have a good onboarding program that like actually taught you about the business when you joined the company, or are you 5 years in and you still don't know what the company is all about, right? Like how much of this is an onboarding issue? How much of this is something else? At WPP, have you guys found some success in doing lunch and learns or things like that where you're teaching data people about the business? Or I guess how do we approach this literacy issue?
That's a great question.
So in a number of different ways, and we're doing a whole bunch of stuff across WPP around us, right? So I mentioned around the program that we had called Demystify AI, which is seeks to answer the elevated question of what AI is, and we do that across different tiers in the organization, right? So we have, for our data practitioners, we have curated learning paths, so then they can brush up on their skills about becoming data scientists and understanding more about ML and all of that kind of good stuff. For our senior kind of to mid to senior level folks, we have a data and AI business school as well, right? And the goal of that is we want to train you on the elements of what data and AI is and how it can be applied, so you can be more confident about having conversations with folks and clients around that, all the way up to the top, right? We've sent all of our senior execs on a Oxford AI business diploma, right? So then they have more of an understanding around how to apply this stuff and what it actually means as well. We also do a whole bunch of things around inspiring folks, right? Because we've got a really solid community. We've got about 4,000 folks in our data and AI community. We run a whole series of events. We run webinars and panel debates. Where we're bringing external folks. I mean, we did one with Juan last week, right? Where he and I talked about the future of data management and data products, right? We'll also get folks to talk about the challenges that they've been overcoming. What was the challenge that you had from a client? What was the approach? What were the techniques that that you used to overcome it as well. So it's not just about saying this is how you should do it, this is how you should think. It's also about it's being very reflective, right? In terms of this is how it's been done, this is how others have approached it, and these are the things. What are those lessons learned, right? If you were going to go and do that again, what would you do different? So it's really about learning and understanding applications of techniques and trying to improve literacy about what everyone else is doing, but also really learning about how things have been done, and where are those success stories, right, that we don't hear about because they get diluted due to the size and the breadth of our organization.
I think it's important also kind of give some context for those who don't know what is WPP. I think we should have done that because you have a very unique, it's a very unique company.
Yeah, I agree. So WPP is a media and advertising company predominantly. The official statistic is that 1 in 4 ads worldwide come from a WPP company. So, we've got, when we're an organization of organizations, right? Some of you are like, who, right? But really, we are a conglomerate of a number of organizations. So we have, hundreds of organizations within our fold, right? They all have their own leadership structures spread across, I think it's about 150 odd countries now, own leadership structures, own departments, their own operating stacks, their own ways of working and all of that. So it's really, really super, super federated, right? So, but we do it in a way in which, it's around inspiring and guiding folks, right? We're going to give you something that you can then take away and learn, right? Whether it's a, course on machine learning, that's something that, all we want people to invest is their time and their energy, right? And I think by doing that, it's become really, really powerful. We've solved problems that we never thought that we even had, let alone the ones that we knew that we had. But we're still on that journey, and it's about, being adaptive, to those needs. The more we, reach out to folks in the network, the more we understand, the more problems and opportunities arise.
One of the things that Tim brought up, and I never thought about this, as shouldn't this in the onboarding process, right? When employees come on board, explain how the business works, right? Not just at a high level, but actually get a little bit more into the details. I think that's a great idea. Do you guys have experience on something like that?
Absolutely. And I think, it's something that we're working on. But one of the things that I've always done in all of my roles is when new people come into the fold is I explain to them what the business is about, right? In a very clear and layman's way, and people get it, because everyone talks in acronyms, everyone talks in jargon, and and everyone pretends that they understand it, but they, more often than not, they don't. So explain in a very nuts and bolts way, this is what the business is, this is how the business model works, this is how we make money ultimately, right? This is what people do, here are the problems, and then just give them that very, very clear, it's as if, and I always, not to be patronizing, I always tell it like, as if I was telling one of my kids, right? So then you get it, and it's just like, okay, that's what you want. And we're doing a lot of work to improve the onboarding process, and there's been some great things that have been done, but that has to be clear. Folks come into the business, like, oh, you sell t-shirts, right? That's it. That's all they know. They don't know how where they come from, how you make the money. That's all got to be very clear and explained.
I think that this is something where it's, I think, ripe for kind of just internal innovation. Like, I don't know people talking about this. I mean, Tim, we all talk to so many different leaders, executives, and I don't think the whole notion of like, oh, let's get HR or HR, employee experience folks involved to discuss, get that onboarding of how the business works, and not just from a high level. Oh, we sell t-shirts, right? Let's like, wait, we sell t-shirts, so you have to get customers. How do we get customers? And let's understand that flow of the business. And then we understand the flow of the money. And then we actually kind of map within the organization, the departments of how that works, and the people, right? Each people in these departments. And then the data systems that they may be using. And then, the data systems, the data leaves from one system goes to another system. And all of that is just context. So when somebody comes asking for a question, yes, we still need to continue to do why. Maybe it's less wise because we actually know now more of the context where it comes from. So This is interesting. This is really interesting. I'm actually thinking about another guest we can get in around from this space and HR and onboarding and getting to understand the business. This is really, really interesting.
Yeah, and it's super, super important because the amount of times I've seen it, I've seen folks that have been in the business for like 6 months or a year, and they still don't get the business model, right? And it's important that they really, really get it, and they understand, not only what the business model is, but they get the wider context of why their role plays an important part into that business model, right? I might be a data analyst, but here's why you're here as a data analyst, right? You are here to do this, and this is how it ladders up to that wider strategy. Right. And that wider, and when you say strategy, it's around, making it really relatable, right? I'm building dashboards so we can understand more about our customers that buy t-shirts. So then we can sell more t-shirts to those kind of customers. And then we can figure out the customers that aren't buying t-shirts so we can target them. I get it. Right. As opposed to a data analyst, I'm just writing reports on t-shirt sales.
And then you also know, like, well, that data for this is coming from this system, but it goes into that other system. And then this is all that context right there we need.
Exactly. And then when people have that knowledge, they ask better questions, right? Because they get more. And it's like, well, why are we using those systems? Why are we writing reports on t-shirt sales? Why, should we be writing reports on t-shirt prospects? It's things like that. And then people become more challenging in the right way.
Yeah, I don't think we're taking, as organizations, onboarding as seriously as we could be, right? In general, I think there's a lot more opportunity there. And just this whole conversation reminds me actually of my first job that I had coming out of college. I worked at a company called Highland Software. And the first week on the job when you join the company, I don't know if they do this anymore, but the first week on the job, you didn't even report to your department yet. You actually went to like what they called Highland University, and you would like learn the product and the systems and about the business for a week straight. And then you would go join your department. And I thought that was super weird. I think it's still kind of weird. But I always remember back to that experience and being like, wow, I wonder why other companies aren't doing that, because you come out of that being like, oh, wow, I understand the business. I understand how the product works. And, even if I never end up coming back to it later, like I have all that context, I'm going to ask really good questions now if I'm in sales, if I'm in marketing, wherever I might be in the organization. I think, go ahead, Vip. Yeah.
No, I was going to say, I've seen it in organizations where as part of the onboarding process, right, you might be working in the IT team, right? But as part of, you've got to then, you've got to work, in some cases it might be a day, might be half a day, where you go and work in each one of those, key departments, right? And you go and shadow someone, right? So you're not going to actually be doing anything, but you just shadow someone and observe key people and just to understand what they're doing. Right. And then as part of, at the end of that onboarding process, what did you learn? Right. And I think it's simple initiatives like that, which are obvious, right? That we just don't do.
Yeah.
Or don't do enough of.
I think before we go into our lightning round, one other topic that's kind of interesting to explore with you, Vip, is around the role that technology can play in helping to bridge the business and data. And I'm curious from your perspective, like, catalogs, quality, governance, policy, learning management, like how does technology play a role in bridging this? What have you seen as is most impactful and how to manage that properly?
So it's, the key thing is around understanding, right? Understanding what exists, right? So let's rewind back to like 2018, back in the UK, GDPR come in, everyone was like, oh my God, we've got this regulation in, we've got a, consent, privacy management, data lifecycle management. Great. What we're going to do? All right. Well, the first thing you need to do is understand what data you've got. Right. And then you've got to apply the meaning to it. Right. You've got to understand, it's customer data, it's sensitive data, it's banking information, and all of that kind of good stuff. Right. And then you start to, understand its heritage and the lineage around it. And then you can start to, define the policies that ladder up to GDPR, and have that meaning around it. Okay, I've got customer data. This is what it means. I've got, banking data. This is what it means. This is, how long are you keeping it for? And then once you start to have that understanding, right, you can then start to apply those policies and your thinking, right? But the thing is that for a lot of organizations, that was absent. We just had data because we just had data, right? It's data that we just created. We don't care. It's like how long it is. It's just there. I don't want to remove it because I don't know what the impact is of removing it, because I don't know what it's, I don't know what it's going to do. So having those semantic foundations of understanding, tick a number of boxes, right? You can start to make sure that you're compliant, right? You can start to make sure that you're more efficient, especially as, organizations embark upon the journey into the cloud. What, you're going to dump everything into the cloud just because you got it, right? What rules are you going to, what lifecycle management policies are you going to put in place, right? Are you going to remove financial information after 3 months after, customers have left you, right? You can be more efficient about your data storage, especially in the world of, with the backdrop of sustainability, right? All, the cloud and all these data centers that we put data in, they consume vast amounts of electricity, right? And for stuff that we don't use, right? As well, are you just going to keep on buying stuff and then just adding more rooms onto your house just to keep all that stuff that you don't even use, right? We've got to move away from being data hoarders, but having understanding around that data also then unlocks the opportunities to leverage in your data. Okay, I didn't know that we had that, right? Or so there's an opportunity to start, mixing and becoming creative with data. You can also then start to untap, a lot of the potential in and around that data. So, that's, I think that's the key part to unlocking it and getting actual real value out of it. It's just having that basic level of understanding of what you've got.
This has been a phenomenal conversation about business. And I think trying kind of to wrap up this discussion, we've been here at Gartner, walking around hundreds of different vendors, and you walk around and you look at all the taglines around that. And it's pretty daunting to kind of figure out what exactly is going on here, because a lot of them say the same thing or overlapping things. And I think it is up to leaders, and actually not just the leaders. I mean, everybody within an organization is to be critical and to really ask those questions. Why, how? I think before we get to the takeaways, I know for me, that's already a takeaway. Ask more whys, ask more hows. All right, I think it's time to go for let's go to our lightning round. We got a couple of questions. The lightning round is presented by Data.World, the data catalog for successful cloud migration. With Data.World, you can ensure business continuity and visibility at every stage of the migration process. I'm going to go first. So WPP is a big company, and you've been putting all these amazing training programs together, right? About data and AI. You have all these partnerships with Oxford. Can smaller companies do that too?
Oh, of course. It's much harder for us to do it on a large scale, but a lot of organizations can do it. There are a lot of partners out there or learning providers that you can partner with, and the content that we're creating, a lot of it is our own content, right? Who better to teach? What better is to use your business to teach the rest of the business and to create content, around that, and do that in creative ways, right? We live in a time where we don't need to get people into classrooms, right? To teach all this stuff. We can, produce videos and more interactive materials. So hell yeah.
Awesome. Love it. Next question is, so the chief data officer, or the person who wears that hat, right? Do they bear a heavy responsibility in bridging IT in the business?
Oh, absolutely. And I think if they're not, then they shouldn't be a CDO, right? Because I know that's controversial, but that's what they should be doing. The chief data officers are there to not only make sure that there is order and structure and all the good things are going on within their, sphere of span of control within those data departments. It's also about making sure that they are working with their peers, the other, their peers in the C-suite, and making sure that they're aligned in what they're doing, what their challenges are, and in how they can work together to help not only resolve those challenges, but identify those opportunities. Because you're not going to ask for, you're not going to do things if you don't know that they exist, right? So they have to have that culture. And going back to what I said earlier, they have then got to, it's down to them to drive that culture of collaboration and cross-pollination across, all of the departments down through the chain of their organization.
Well, that was also actually a theme when I was at the MIT CDO conference. About all the CDOs were talking about the business, how do you define success from a business perspective, not that much about technology. And I agree with you. Like, if you're not doing that, then you're not the CDO. You should not be the CDO. Yeah, all right, next question. Are companies like WPP seeing the idea of knowledge rise in relevance from them versus just data?
Oh, agree. I'm a huge advocate of knowledge. And I made a statement earlier on about, being data rich and knowledge poor. And, I'm not just saying that about our organization. I just say this is prevalent in all organizations. So, we need to start making more of the connection between data all the way through to information, all the way through to insight and knowledge, right? And I think it was like, there's a quote, there's a stat from Gartner around, it's like, 87% of data is unused, right? Because it doesn't, but there's no meaning around it. So absolutely, we should be ensuring that we are transforming data into knowledge, right? And if we're not, then that data is just not serving a purpose, right? It shouldn't be there. And we should really be questioning, why we have it and what we're doing.
Love this.
Yeah. Last question. So, Vip, fast forward 10 years from now, will we have by and large solved this data and business literacy problem? Is this something that we're going to actually solve for, or are we in this for the long haul?
I think we're going to be in it for the long haul. I think we're going to be a lot more poised around the approaches that we're taking. I think there's going to be more appreciation of the business value chain, across technology and across the business departments. I think what is going to change is the types of challenges, right, and the types of ways in which we're doing business, right? So, but I think we're going to have some solid foundations in terms of bridging those two things, together, right? I read something a while ago where someone said, the business of the future won't have a chief data officer because the mantra of data will be embedded into the organization, right? You won't need it, and they also mentioned about Amazon, right? The world's biggest data-driven business. Yeah, who's the CDO? They don't have one.
They don't have one.
So I think we'll see more people, especially in senior roles, our C-suites that are more technology focused and more technology driven and more data literate as well as business literate.
This brings up another interesting thought. Will not having a CDO means you're being successful?
Not necessarily. It might mean that you've potentially kind of got to that nirvana point as well. But I think there's, there is still a time and a place for having a CDO in that organization, right? It's when all of your ducks line up. It's when everyone kind of has that level of understanding across business and technology. You reach that point, but it's not a bad thing, having one. I just think organizations that are really technology driven and technology focused will probably be the first ones that will be potentially clipping those roles.
All right, time for TTT. Tim, take us away with your takeaways. Go first.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many good takeaways, Vip. Thank you so much for this conversation that we've been able to have today. So we talked a lot about sort of this need to bridge the business and IT and technology groups and how to do that and the big challenges around that. And you had mentioned that business and technology groups always have these demands of each other, and that a lot of times they're not speaking the same language, and that you must accept that this problem exists. Right. It kind of reminds me of sort of like the multiple stages of grief or something like that. Right. You have to acknowledge that there is this issue, that there is this problem, and that everyone has to play a role in solving it. You mentioned about understanding being a really clear goal, that we have to understand each other. We have to ask how. We have to ask why. You need to create a culture and empower the people on your team and across the organization to ask why, to understand the value, and to encourage them to make it clear that they're not trying to be belligerent or cause confusion and delay, that asking why is a good thing because it highlights the value. It makes it clear to them what they should be doing so that they do the right thing, and it's the most impactful thing. And it makes sure that we as an organization prioritize properly, right? And throughout all of this, it's a journey that everyone's going on together to understand the business more as a whole, and to have these what you called grown-up conversations to really qualify those wants and needs. How do you get people to ask why? Well, you should ask why when you're asked to do something. So you should make sure that those people are asking why. You should, as a manager, make it clear to your team that they're empowered to do this. And you also talked about the making it that it's important for people to know the strategic objectives of the company. Like, what is the company trying to do? What does the company do? And those are going to be key factors in helping them to ask the right questions and have smart why questions to ask. So I thought that was a really good setup on sort of making sure people are asking the right questions and understanding. Juan, what about you? What were some of your big takeaways?
I got several here. So how do we establish this culture, right? So we've talked about the literacy. Yes, we need to have data literacy, but we're in this agreement that we need to start thinking about this business literacy. And we did talk about like these data translators, and hey, we acknowledge that they can be unicorns in a way. And I mean, and it's hard to go find them too. So it's not just about having that particular role that exists. Like, this needs to be something that other people are going to have within kind of their existing job, because otherwise they're going to think it's somebody else's job. Yeah. I want to go do that, right? You need to embed the responsibilities as well, so it's not someone else's job. but you need to empower them, right? You need to give them the tools and make it clear, make it easy around this. We talked about the team structures. I think it's very clear that the whole decentralization push kind of your data scientists, your analysts, engineers into those different departments, right? I think that's one of the important aspects. You said something I'll never forget. Think customers, not rows. That is a brilliant takeaway, because that's the knowledge first aspect right there. Data first, it's rows. Knowledge first, oh, those are customers actually. And you really want to identify groups that are working against each other and protect against those car crashes.
Yeah.
That's a really important takeaway right there. So how do we enable these data and business literacy with an organization? Well, it's education, right? Like you guys at WPP, you've established all these programs around AI, doing things like with Oxford trainings, having a lot of guest speakers, how to special workshops, learn from others who have done it before. We're talking now about how we could possibly do this with employee onboarding. A lot of possibilities of things to go do there. It's just something that I really love. When you have the knowledge, you ask better questions. And I think this is another brilliant takeaway. What roles can technology play? It's in assisting with the understanding, because when you understand that data, again, you can leverage that data more. You can ask those better questions. So technology there is to make you really understand better that data. And I think that last takeaway that we talked about, the CDO, I think that if the CDO, the goal should be that the CDO kind of becomes irrelevant. I mean, look at those big companies. They don't even have CDOs around that. We did a lot. How did we do on takeaways? Anything we missed?
No, I think you've covered it. Both of you've covered it brilliantly. Wow. We did get through a lot there.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap it up. We got 3 questions for you.
Okay.
What's your advice about data, about life, brought on purpose? Second, who should we invite next? And third, what are the resources that you follow? What are the things that you read, people that you follow, conferences that you go to?
So I think in terms of kind of my, approaches or ways to think about things, I just think, never, be curious. Don't ever be afraid to challenge. And this is my whole personal mantra, which is, make sure you learn something new every day, right? Have one takeaway every single day, right? And it might be something simple, right? I learned how to cook sausages or whatever, but make sure you reflect and you learn something new every single day, right? And have that kind of mind. And I think that's the thing. And don't be afraid of failing. Don't be afraid of changing your mind, right? Don't be afraid to say, you might think that sausages are the best thing, today, and tomorrow it's just like, well, it's bacon tomorrow, right? Don't be afraid of that, right? Don't be stuck in your ways. So I think that's something that's I've always grown up with as well. So
who should we invite next?
Who should we invite next? Wow, you've had a real great number of speakers on here. Wow.
Or a topic or a type of person, or if you
I don't know. I think I think trying to, I think what I would love to hear more about is from an organization or a person or someone, who's really good at this, right? To understand what we're missing, right? We're all talking about, ones that, we think we're good, or, but who are those key organizations that are really, really nailing this, right? And how will they actually do it? It doesn't have to be a large organization, but it could be a small one, right? Because I really feel as though I'd like to learn from one another, right? And how they're approaching things. So
well, call anybody who's listening, and if you want to share your story, please reach out to us. Finally, what resources do you follow?
I don't do a lot of reading as a lot. I do, I pursue the right people on LinkedIn and making sure that I'm reading the right, blog posts as well. And I just think it's about, for me, it's about absorbing the right information from the right people and debating in your mind everything that you hear, listen, and learn, right? As well. So there's various folks that I follow, but I just think it's around the people that are around you. They're going to be very key to your immediate learning and understanding as well.
Love that. You're big on building that network, and and being able to share knowledge with each other. And I love that. It's a very connected approach to knowledge sharing.
Yeah, and that's something I've been following a lot, and kind of finding the right people, connecting with them, trying to go talk to them, have one-on-ones, one-to-one people. I'm very privileged that I get to talk to you, and we get to chat and just kind of like share what's going on in the world.
Absolutely. And I think, given everything that's happened in the last couple of years, that level of connectivity is dissolved a bit, right? We don't always have those impromptu conversations, right? We don't always have those things that we hear someone else talking about, whilst we're in the office that like pique our interest. Those are things, I think we've lost the ability to be able to listen, learn, and connect with people, outside, of a screen. So, being here and meeting people, talking to people, understanding what they're doing, listening, learning is really, really key. And sometimes to me, that's more powerful and it's going to be more valuable than, reading, any book.
And with that, after this, we're heading to dinner and continue talking about discover things. So next week, we're going to be chatting with Roll Pot. He's from Wpp, and Wpp is a company I find fascinating. Company's been around for 400 years. And I remember talking to them and saying, we need to be around for another 400 years. That is thinking about being resilient. So that's one of the conversations we're having next week with Roll. And we're actually going to be all live in Austin. We're going to be in the Data.World headquarters. So it's going to be a really fun conversation over there. Thank you very much for all our listeners. This episode, again, was brought to you by Data.World, the data catalog for the data mesh, who can help you do the data mesh in a whole new paradigm for data empowerment. So to learn more, visit Data.World. With that, Vip, Tim, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. It's been an honor and privilege to be here. So
this was great. Looking forward to cheersing you in person in just a few weeks' time, hopefully.
Cheers.